Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, May 18th. Great to have you with us this week. Should the state of Ohio further separate parochial and public schools when it comes to high school sports? And if they did, what impact would it have on the Akron area? We'll talk about it. Can you trust Ernie Tarl with all of his baggage to run a charter school? He's got an idea for one. We'll discuss that. And Akron School Board President Jason Haas is our guest to talk about the major cuts headed for the district. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. A lot to talk about this week, so let's meet our panel. Phil Trexler joins us this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Great to see Ed Esposito here this week from WAKR. And always great to have Bob Dyer here this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Last week we did talk about texting and driving. Would the state law go far enough? Now we know what the law is going to do. Does it do anything, guys? Is there any teeth to this?
It's wimpy.
Wimpy?
Yeah, the AP stories keep saying there are 36 other states with texting laws. There are actually 44 other states with some form of texting law. 36 of those states, for all adults, have texting as a primary offense. If you're driving down the road, a cop sees you texting, he can pull you over and give you a ticket. In Ohio, you have to be doing something else wrong. You have to run a red light or something before they can ticket you for it. So, in effect, it's worthless, in my opinion.
You know, it's fascinating is if you're over 25, parked at a red light, but the car is running and texting, the cop can't do anything. If you're 25 or under, the cop can pull you over and cite you for it. Is it 8? It's 18 to a range, though, isn't it? I thought it was older than that.
Well, I think, you know, the fact that enforcement's going to be difficult, this is really about raising public awareness, and I think that's the real nitty-gritty to this, is the raising the public awareness.
If anybody that doesn't know that texting while you're driving
is Bob, you
dangerous.
know, this puts a greater emphasis on it, I think. It's similar to what we did with the seatbelts. You know, the campaign to buckle up has really brought about a lot of folks buckling up. And I think in this situation, there's going to be a law out there. The kids are going to be more aware of it than they already are, and you know that's what it's all about. You can't enforce it; it's way too difficult.
Sure, you could if it was a primary offense. I drove by 5 people this week that had their head like this.
But you don't know how old they are.
Doesn't matter if you're an adult.
It does. Well, the matter is, it raises public awareness. Why are you arguing about this?
Because it should be a primary offense.
It's public awareness.
Every other state in the union almost has it as a primary offense.
This brings the issue greater to the forefront. We're talking about it on this show.
It's a PR campaign.
But it is. Exactly. It's fluff. I had that exact same thought when I was reading your column on my smartphone while I was driving to work.
Thanks.
If you don't wear your seatbelt, you risk your own life.
Right.
If you're texting while driving, now you're risking my life.
Other people's lives. And right. And
so why didn't they go far enough? If other states have done it and made it a primary offense, they're already on the table, they're writing it out. Why didn't they go a little farther?
Well, you know, a lot of it has to do, I mean, you have to give credit where you have to be realistic about this. Phil's right about the point. This is something else the cops are going to pull people over for, please. I mean, it's just, you know, you're just adding on to it, and it's more and more. And it's the reason it's fluff is because it doesn't have any teeth to it, because people don't enforce it. Because it's not enforced. Because they can't enforce it.
They can't because of the law. There's no law.
It's not only because of the law. So now the cops are going to be looking at, you know, and trying to see who's texting every time when they drive over.
If somebody's going like this while they're driving, they should get a ticket.
Why can't they do that now and say it's reckless driving because they weren't paying attention to driving? That's my point about this. They can.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. You know, the police. There's already rules on the books, but you know, a cynic, sorry, Phil, would say that this is fluff. It's just window dressing so politicians can come out and say, yeah, we passed a tough law against texting and this looks good, vote for me. That's what this is about.
So it's cosmetic.
It's fluff.
Yeah,
it is. It's absolutely cosmetic.
A lot of communities have passed the aggressive panhandling legislation in their communities, but they really don't charge people with it. It's just to make people feel better. So a year from now, when we look at the law or we look at the arrest, will there be many at all?
There'll be
for
some.
texting while driving?
I think there'll be some. A lot of it will probably come after the fact. You know, a lot of times what they'll do is when there's a crash or something like that, they'll look at someone's cell phone. That's the first thing they'll do.
Right.
And they will, the police will look at it and try to determine if they were texting or on the phone at the time of the crash. And, you know, that goes to distracted driving and whatnot.
Yeah, so they can give them a ticket after they rear end me at a red light. That's a
Right.
great law.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Right.
A little late in the game.
Do that with DUIs, though, too, you know.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
They pull you over.
No, but they also, too, will charge you with a DUI after a crash.
Yeah, but you can also be charged with DUI if you don't crash.
True. But you can also be, you know,
Yeah, but
Let's
if you're
go have a
18,
drink and talk about it.
yeah, you can text each other while you're doing it.
That's right.
Well, on that note, also from Columbus this week, the Ohio High School Athletic Association took a referendum vote, the second time now, on whether there should be split divisions and breaking things up, looking at schools and athletics as opposed to just looking at enrollment. It got shot down again. Some of the parochial school systems say that they've got too many advantages. Some of the suburbs versus the inner city, it should be more than just enrollment. Bob, you've looked at this. Is there an unfair advantage here?
Absolutely. All you have to do is look at if you look at the all-time standings for state titles, just for example, of the top 7 schools with all-time state titles, 5 of them are private schools. Contrast that with the fact that of all the students in Ohio high schools, 8% go to private schools, so it's way out of whack. The reason is that the private schools are basically fielding all-star teams from 4 and 5 county areas where some community of 15,000 is stuck with whoever happens to be in their community. So it's apples and oranges. The reason this was shot down, I think, is because it wouldn't have really made much difference. I think what you're going to see next year is there's been a petition drive among some folks in Northeast Ohio to split the tournaments completely, public and private, under the season tournament, which makes sense to me. Because, again, it was apples and oranges. There's nothing wrong with them playing each other during the season, but when it's tournament time and you lose and go home, it's just absolutely unfair.
We talk about boosters that get involved in these schools as well.
That has a little something to do with it, not a lot.
I mean, you're drawing from a bigger talent pool.
Oh,
I mean, if you look just in the Akron area, I mean, you've got Hoban and St. V and CVCA. They can clearly do that. You go up to Cleveland, it's Ignatius and St. Ed's and Padua. To Bob's point, you're not stuck by geography. You're not stuck by what school district you have to be in. I'm not saying necessarily it's recruiting, but you do get a broader talent pool of kids that are coming to the schools. So it kind of makes sense.
You look at the rosters of a school like Walsh, and you got kids from all over Northeast Ohio.
Right.
There is definitely a competitive imbalance there. I also think that some of the public schools, I think they don't want their own division because they like being able to compete against these schools. The David versus Goliath thing, and I think it would be nice in some fashion that they can meet for a championship game, maybe public versus private.
It's complicated, though, too, because you start looking at sharing gate revenues and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you bring in teams that have a really dedicated fan base, that's, it's kind of why Ohio State plays MAC schools. It's the same theory.
Like Ohio State playing Ohio Wesleyan is a comparison I've used at times. I mean, it's absolutely 2 different kinds of programs.
Would it make sense to set up some parameters to share some of these programs in a city like Akron, where you have North and East high schools? Let's say you only have a few dozen kids playing football, but if they could combine and field one football team from the 2 schools, it would be competitive.
They're still going to be annihited in the tournament.
But they still pretty much do that with
But on
Glenville
Friday nights, it would be more
Yeah.
competitive as opposed to an 0-10 season year after year for a few dozen kids.
But you're opening the door here to the whole idea of consolidating either academic boundaries or academic programs or scholastic sports programs. The consolidation is the one word that people don't want to use right now.
Yeah, but in some sports, let's say tennis, there might only be 5 kids at one inner city school and 5 at another. They need 7. Couldn't they combine and the 10 of them be a representative team? Because there are sports that are struggling just to have enough kids to get out there, let alone compete with the parochial schools.
That makes sense. I think that's a whole different question in the private-public debate, which has been raging on for 3 years, but that would make sense.
I think it's a big reason why Glenville has been so successful in football up in Cleveland. I mean, that's the school to go to if you're in Cleveland public schools.
But that's an aberration. People say, well, with open enrollment, it's fair. No, it's not. Look at the numbers. Look at the percentage of kids who go to Stowe who don't live in Stowe. I mean, it's still not.
So do we see that here locally? I mean, do we see, let's say, Bookdale is an inner city powerhouse in football? Is open enrollment feeding them and hurting some of the other schools?
Sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say it does. Right. I mean, and to be honest about it, if you're a parent and you have a student who's athletically gifted, let's say you have a student who's a good football player, wouldn't you want that student to go to a high school where he might be showcased and it helps his chances of getting a college scholarship? All these kids start out with these dreams of playing in the NFL. Small minority, small percentage get to that point, but that doesn't stop the fact that you got a dream that someday you play in the NFL. If you get to go to a football factory, which I would say, you can call Hoban, you could call Walsh, strong football programs. If you're a basketball player, wouldn't you want to play at a place like St. V? That is perennially going to state championships. Yeah, but wouldn't you want your kid to do that because more people are going to see him play because you're going to have scouts that are going to see him play.
Just to quote Dan Gilbert, you just don't want to turn all the other schools into the Washington Generals out there. That you need competitive programs, but you need across the entire community, a debate that will continue, and we'll look at in future editions right here on NewsNite.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
If you've been a fan of this broadcast over the last decade, you know his name, Ernie Tarl, former Akron City Councilman, in and out of the news, not always for the best of reasons. This time he wants to open a charter school. John Higgins from the Beacon Journal broke this story this week. We've seen the signs around town, and even without knowing the details, what do you think people's reactions are when the first they hear Ernie Tarl running an education facility?
Running a charter school, and I think that's, charter schools sometimes have this negative connotation within the community. There's, great divide there between people who support public schools and those who support the charter schools. This guy has baggage. I mean, he's got, he's got bags upon bags. He's even got the bankruptcy. He's got, the charges coming, getting booted off of council, and he's got quite a reputation around town, and the fact that he's now going to run a school educating our children raises a lot of eyebrows. There wasn't a whole great deal of turnout when he had his little get-together with parents. I think there was about 20 who showed up. He's got a lot of hurdles to overcome before he can even open the doors. I think there's a lot. His announcement's been, greeted with a lot of skepticism, and probably well-deserved.
Knowing that he's the only councilman to be recalled for taking money?
You know what?
Is that just a scarlet letter on this?
It's buyer beware. Anybody can open a business these days. That's the great thing about America, even scoundrels. Not that I'm calling Ernie a scoundrel, because that would be wrong. But, any parent that's going to plunk down money or send their kid to a charter school, just, for God's sake, look and see who's teaching them. Look and see who's running the school, and maybe that'll be enough for you to make an informed decision.
Where do you go with this? I'm just shocked that he has people buying into this. But
so you're not sending your kids to Ernie Tarl?
Not sending my kids to Ernie Tarl,
okay.
And I imagine a lot of other parents would be skeptical as well. But I'll be interested to see if he gets enough people and enough dollars to open the doors and get there. Another story making headlines on this Friday involves a high school student from Revere who crashed her car coming home from a bar. Yes, a high school student in a bar. Guys, she was 18 years old. She made a mistake and went to a bar. She crashes, serious injuries. Who's really to blame here? Her, the bar, both? Where do we begin?
I like the fact that her mother came out publicly and, scolded her daughter as her daughter's lying in ICU there with broken pelvis and fractured skull and whatnot. The mother's
pretty severe back injuries.
Yeah, exactly. And the mother, concedes right up front, my daughter made a bad mistake and she's paying for it. On the other side, somebody at a bar in this area served this 18-year-old girl alcohol and sent her on her way while she's drunk, and she crashed her car and was ejected through the sunroof. They're equally to blame. I mean, the bar's breaking the law, she's breaking the law, but ultimately it was an adult who served her alcohol. There's still a lot of details to be flushed out as to how she actually presented herself at the bar. Did the bar check her ID and whatnot?
She had a fake ID.
Perhaps.
They all
Yeah,
did.
I mean, come on.
Well, sometimes they don't check though too. I mean, there's a reputation from some of these bars. Pretty young females, that's good for business. They let them in and they don't care about.
Well, and that's a big issue here. I mean, the Department of Liquor Control doesn't have the wherewithal. I mean, you want to talk about enforceability. What are you going to put a cop at every bar? Are you going to put a liquor control agent in every bar doing this? I mean, all you got to do is come downtown to South Main. On a college night at the entertainment district in Akron, is everyone getting carded? Is everyone getting checked? I mean, do they push back on fake IDs? Go to Water Street in Kent. It's the same thing. I mean, it's just, it's kind of a rite of passage to have the fake ID. Yeah. I mean, you and I are old enough. We didn't need fake IDs. We looked old when we were 18. But Eric, you probably had a fake ID, didn't you?
We're not going.
We're not going
down my college days.
Okay, I rest my case.
But no.
No, son, I didn't have a fake ID, says Eric the dad.
What do we know about this bar? Because the bar is not named in the Beacon Journal article.
Right.
Did WKR name the bar involved? What do we know about this establishment?
We talked to a manager there who said that their policy is that they don't serve anyone over under 21, that they card them at the door when they come in. We'll take him at his word. I know in the database they've been popped a couple of times over the last couple of years for serving underage, but I don't know if that's more or less than other bars in the Merriman Valley. I don't know if it's more or less than other bars in the Akron area. That's something we're taking a look at. Phil will probably steal that story and get it in there on Saturday before we get it, because he works that fast. But taking a look at the history of the bar, I mean, that's it. Again, you go to enforceability. I mean, they on the face of it, they don't have a reputation for being a place that is just free and easy. Teenagers come and go and drink all the time. Having said that, I don't know if I can really back that up, because the only time that they've been cited for it was by liquor control. I'm sure depended on a sting or complaints that they had gotten from parents.
As the father of a person who told me many years after the fact that she utilized a fake ID in the Valley, I have a little bit of sympathy for the bar. I mean, some of these people look much older than they are at that age. I mean, it's really tough to tell. If you had a lineup of kids and you had to guess their age, it'd be tough. If they have a decent fake ID and there's pressure to get people in and out and they're looking, it happens. I mean, the bar should do whatever they can, obviously, to prevent it. But with kids getting the fake IDs, I think 80% of the blame in this case should go to the kid.
Well, and also, the other question, how drunk was she when she got behind the wheel? I mean, making an assumption that the bar let her leave and that she was plowed. How do you know she wasn't buzzed? How do you know she was plowed? I haven't seen what her blood alcohol level was.
Drunk enough to crash into a tree.
Well, she's drunk enough to crash into a tree driving on Bath Township roads. With all due respect, I think there's plenty of people getting
I live in
wrecked.
Bath, and those are finely maintained roads.
Maybe she was texting at the time. I mean,
She's probably texting.
Well, let's do hope that she gets better, and we'll see how the investigation plays out. But another topic where IDs are involved is in Cleveland at the casino. $380 million. The doors are finally open. They're checking people's IDs left and right. We knew it'd be big for the Open. It'd be big for this first weekend. Is this going to draw a lot of people from the Akron area who were going to go somewhere else, or new people to go to Cleveland? What's the impact in Akron?
Half of my neighbors are going to trot up there within the first 2 weeks. I mean, I don't think it'll have much economic impact on Akron, because those folks were going to Detroit or Pittsburgh or Wheeling or all of the above. But I do think there's going to be a steady caravan up there.
It's another reason to consider doing something in Cleveland. So if you're going to go up there for a ball game, or if you're going to go up there to see a show or something like that, there's another reason for you to stay there. I don't know. To Bob's point, I think it does make Cleveland kind of a destination point for the region, for people to, at the very least, just go check it out. I mean, what was the stat I saw the first day it was open? Wasn't it the busiest poker room in the country? Second only to a poker room in Los Angeles that had 150 tables. So, just taking a look at the buzz on this thing, people want to gamble. That's why this thing passed to begin with.
I'll be interested to see what impact it really, because we know it's going to be big for the first weekend, but whether they can keep those numbers up. Big weekend in Cleveland ahead. I'll thank you now. Bob, Ed, Phil, thank you so much. We'll continue to talk about the casino as well in future editions here on Newsnight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
2 weeks ago, the Akron School Board made history, the biggest cuts in the history of the district, $20 million. We're talking teachers, we're talking other jobs, we're talking sports programs and music. So what's at stake, and why did they have to make those cuts? Board President Jason Haas joins us this week to talk more about the cuts. Jason, great to have you back with us again.
Thank you.
First of all, how tough were these cuts to make, just with so many things and the emotions involved?
They were very difficult, and you look at the process throughout this entire year. We started with school closures in February, and now here in May, 3 months later, we're talking about 202 employees. So this entire 90, 120-day period we've been talking about has been very draining emotionally on senior staff, on the board. It's been a difficult period.
How much is this caused by the economy? How much is caused by the levy that failed in November?
Even if that levy had passed, and I think we've talked about this previously, we would have had to make some cuts. They wouldn't have been as deep. But state funding is down. We've lost race to the top money over the past year that we had for 2 years that helped bridge a gap. We had some deficits at that time too that helped plug, not entirely, but it helped plug. So a lot of these different factors are coming together into a head right now.
Why should people believe that you've made every cut possible outside of the classroom before having to reach where you have?
It's difficult to explain that, but if you look at the history of the last several years, administrators have been cut. We're talking about moving some of our custodial staff from 8 hours down to 5 hours, maybe even looking at buildings being cleaned every other day rather than every day. And we're doing everything we can creatively and completely outside the box, to use a belabored term, but to do that in order to stay out of the classroom. It is absolute last place we want to go.
There are people out there that no matter what you say, they were not going to buy into it because you're building new buildings. You've got millions to build new buildings. How do you not have a few thousand for this program or that?
Well, and again, this is difficult to explain, but the building process is funded through bond sales by the city, which in turn is funded by the 0.25% income tax that Akron voters passed 8 or 9 years ago now. So it is a separate pot of money that cannot be used for general revenue at all. It must solely be used only for buildings.
Middle schools seem to take a brunt of the announcements. Beyond just the staff members, we're talking music, sports, maybe foreign language. Why those areas?
Those are not requirements by state law. We have to maintain certain things for graduation requirements at the high school level. So when you're looking at things, you have to start saying, how do we still meet state standards and make cuts that'll get us to the budget we need to have.
But how do you do that? How do you separate the emotions of, there are kids, this is what they get up for. They get up because they like middle school band or middle school volleyball, and you're taking that away from them. How do you separate those emotions from the finances of the decisions you have to make?
I don't know that you entirely do. You know that these decisions are going to hurt people, both teachers and more importantly, going to hurt students. And as you said, you're going to take away activities that help drive them, that help give them, beyond the classroom studies, a reason to be there every day and an enjoyable moment in their day.
How are the teachers taking this? How's the teachers union working with you on this?
Well, unfortunately, we're doing this right in the time of a negotiation period. And I think the reality is very clear to all players in those negotiations that these are difficult times, these are difficult cuts, but they must be made. And, you know, as I said before, we've always had a pretty decent relationship, particularly at negotiating time. That's continued so far through this period. So it's been pretty amicable, but obviously it's not perfect.
How many unions are we talking about?
Should I always get confused? There's either 5 or 6. Almost every classification, so to speak, of employee has a union.
How concerned are you about class size going up with fewer teachers?
You are, but you're not. In some cases, you know, we are programmed for X number. Depends on the level. You know, elementary is a little bit smaller, middle school is a little bit larger, high school is larger yet. And very rarely do we bump up on that number anyway in a classroom. So we think that right now we're looking at maybe a 2 to 3 student increase in most classrooms.
Which would get us into the high 20s, low 30s.
In some of the high school classes, you're talking about high 20s, maybe low 30s. In the elementary, you're talking about low 20s. Middle school, probably mid 20s.
Is education still effective with class size like that?
You know, K to 3, research shows that it's best to be around the 18 to 20 range. Beyond that, class size is a little more fungible, but I think we're still going to be able to deliver a quality product. Absolutely.
You're back on the ballot in November.
Yes.
What's at stake?
You know, we don't know the size of that levy yet. I'll probably start talking about that next month. It's going to have to increase to some degree, the millage, because, you know, we just found out last month in April that commercial industrial property, when it was reevaluated, actually went down in value. So our deficit increased randomly in the middle of all these cuts. The stake is that we won't be, again, able to completely alleviate the deficit for next year. But if we don't, we will have essentially the same cuts next year as we do this year.
But you don't have middle school sports, you don't have middle school music to go after. What is going to be up for grabs should this fail?
We will probably be looking at state minimums.
High school sports?
That would have to
On
be
the
part of the
table?
discussion, certainly. It's one of the last things we want to discuss, but it will definitely be part of it.
But not untouchable.
Not untouchable, no.
School closures?
Yes. Again, buildings won't be untouchable.
Middle schools, high schools could be part of that?
You know, you have to look at where students are going and what neighborhoods are being served well and what buildings are suffering. Maybe they have a lot of enrollment coming from outside their district, and those children could go to another building. What you don't want to do in a closure process is overburden any one building. So you have to do it in such a way that's fairly intelligent.
We talked last week in looking at the cuts about the strategy used in the previous levy, that it was all positive. The district's going the right direction, help us continue that. Can you afford to take that same strategy this time?
I think you have to some degree, but you have to also be very honest and say, listen, this is what we did 6 months ago. And if this doesn't pass, we're going to have to do the same thing again next year. And as you just said a moment ago, the easy stuff is gone. There's no more middle school sports. There's no more of these things that aren't required. So what is left?
Is the state listening? I know they don't always have the dollars, and every public district wants more money, but is the state listening to the issues that you have?
I don't feel they are right now. I think in the past it comes and goes. You know, I've taken, in my 5th year now, I've taken the stance that whatever Columbus does is either going to be neutral towards us or it's going to damage us. I don't think they understand on a local level how difficult it is to accomplish the task they've given us.
So how do you get them to open their ears and listen?
You know, we work through various organizations, Ohio School Board Association, Buckeye administrators, to tell legislatures, to tell the governor's office, this is what we're facing. These are the things we need to make our job easier to actually focus on the product of education rather than focus exclusively, as we have so far this year, on finances.
So are the troubles you're having now, as we have about a minute left, are they feeding the charter schools, which are taking your customers?
Charter school competition is a huge problem. You look at our budget, and it's a line item that's called purchase services, which really looks very innocuous until you realize that a big chunk of that is what goes out to the charter schools. It would not be in this case, but there have been times in the past, since I've been on the board, we've had a deficit that if you were to take away the charter competition, we would not have had a deficit. And so it is a huge problem.
20 seconds left. What will make the difference for voters in November for this levy?
I hope that when we're out, starting this summer even, and we're talking to them, that they understand how critical it is for us to go forward to accomplish best education. The future of this region depends on the leaders we're training today, to be entrepreneurial, to be forward-thinking, to get into the sciences, and we need to sell that. Okay,
Jason Haas, Board President, thank you so much. We'll continue to talk about it. Have a great week, everybody. Again, you can watch this entire broadcast again over at NewsNite.net. See you next Friday. Good night.